The neon lights of Europa Station flickered against the perpetual night of space, casting long shadows through the abandoned lower levels. Lyra pressed herself against the cold metal wall, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The genetic modifications that made her deadly had also given her silvery skin that seemed to absorb and reflect light in equal measure, beautiful, but impossible to hide. Another explosion rocked the station. The hunters were getting closer. Lyra had been running for 3 years now, ever since she'd escaped from GenCorp's underground facilities. They'd created her to be the perfect assassin, someone whose very touch could stop a heart in seconds. But they hadn't counted on her developing a conscience. The sound of boots on metal grating echoed through the corridor. Lyra held her breath, pressing deeper into the shadows. She'd learned early on that conventional weapons were useless against GenCorp's enhanced soldiers. Her touch was her only defense, but using it meant adding another name to the list of lives she'd taken. Another face to haunt her dreams. "I know you're here," a deep voice called out. Not the mechanical tone of a GenCorp soldier. This was different. Human. "And I'm not with them." Lyra remained silent. She'd fallen for that trick before. The bounty on her head was enough to buy a small planet, and plenty of independents had tried to claim it. "Look," the voice continued, closer now. "If I wanted to capture you, I wouldn't be announcing myself. Name's Marcus. I'm here to help." A figure stepped into view, and Lyra's enhanced vision caught every detail. Tall, with dark skin and a scatter of scars across his face that spoke of years of combat. His hands were empty, but the way he moved suggested military training. What caught her attention was his eyes, one brown, one cybernetic, glowing faintly in the dim light. "Why would you help me?" Lyra asked, not moving from her position. Marcus shrugged. "Because I've seen what GenCorp does to people like you. And because I'm probably the only person in this sector who can actually touch you without dying." That got her attention. "Impossible. Everyone dies. The toxin in my system only works on unmodified humans and most augmented ones," Marcus finished. "But some of us." He held up his hand, and Lyra saw the faint shimmer of microscopic scales across his skin. "Well, let's just say GenCorp isn't the only one playing with genetics." Another explosion, closer this time. The station's warning systems began blaring, and red emergency lights bathed the corridor in crimson. "We've got about 3 minutes before this section is overrun," Marcus said. "I've got a ship docked in Bay 7. You can either trust me and maybe live, or stay here and definitely get caught. Your choice." Lyra's mind raced. Every instinct told her to run, to find her own way out. But she was tired. Tired of running, tired of being alone, tired of killing. And something about Marcus's casual confidence made her want to believe him. "If you're lying," she said, stepping out of the shadows, "I'll make sure your death is particularly slow." Marcus grinned, the expression transforming his scarred face into something almost handsome. "Fair enough. Shall we?" They ran through the station's maintenance tunnels, Marcus leading the way with the sure-footed confidence of someone who'd memorized the layout. Behind them, the sounds of combat grew louder, GenCorp's forces engaging with station security. "Why now?" Lyra asked as they climbed through a maintenance shaft. "Why help me after all this time?" "Because," Marcus grunted, pulling himself up to a higher level, "something big is coming. GenCorp isn't just after you anymore. They're collecting all their experiments. Something about consolidating assets. And trust me, you don't want to be anywhere near them when whatever they're planning goes down." They emerged into a hangar bay just as another explosion rocked the station. Through the massive windows, Lyra could see ships detaching from the station's docking arms, fleeing the chaos. Among them was a sleek vessel that looked military, but with obvious modifications. "That's our ride," Marcus said, already moving toward it. "The Shadowcaster." "Not pretty," but she's fast and... He was cut off by the sound of hydraulic joints. 3 GenCorp soldiers dropped from the level above, their augmented armor gleaming under the emergency lights. Their weapons were already raised. Target acquired, one of them announced in that familiar mechanical tone that still haunted Lyra's nightmares. Surrender for retrieval. Marcus moved faster than Lyra thought possible, drawing a weapon she hadn't even seen him carrying. "Sorry boys," he said, "but she's not on the market." The firefight that followed was brief but intense. Marcus's weapon fired some kind of electromagnetic pulse that short-circuited one soldier's armor. Lyra, moving on instinct, got close enough to touch another. He dropped instantly, his systems overloading from the contact with her toxic skin. The 3rd soldier managed to graze Marcus with a shot, burning through his jacket. But before he could fire again, Marcus had closed the distance and slammed something against the soldier's helmet. There was a crack of electricity, and the soldier collapsed. "We need to move," Marcus said, already heading for his ship. That was just the advance team. Lyra followed, her mind still processing how efficiently they'd worked together. She'd spent so long fighting alone, she'd forgotten what it was like to have someone watching her back. The ship's airlock opened at their approach. Inside, it was all business, military-grade systems mixed with custom modifications. Marcus slid into the pilot's seat while Lyra strapped herself in beside him. "Last chance to back out," he said, his hands flying over the controls. Lyra looked back at the station, at the life she'd carved out for herself in its shadows. Then she looked at Marcus, this stranger who'd risked his life to help her and somehow survived her touch. "Just fly," she said. The Shadowcaster detached from the station just as more GenCorp ships emerged from hyperspace. But Marcus was as good as his word, the ship was fast. They slipped past the corporate vessels and disappeared into the darkness of space, leaving Europa Station and its hunters far behind. As the adrenaline faded, Lyra found herself studying her unlikely savior. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Marcus replied, plotting a course through the ship's navigation system. "There's a whole network of people like us, GenCorp's failed experiments and others they've tried to control. We look out for each other. And now, we look out for you too." For the first time in years, Lyra felt something dangerous growing in her chest, hope. The Shadowcaster drifted silently through the asteroid belt of the Kuiper sector, its stealth systems making it nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. In the ship's small medical bay, Lyra watched as Marcus treated the plasma burn on his arm, her silver skin reflecting the soft blue light of the healing unit. "You still haven't told me how you became immune," she said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since their escape. "Those scales, they're not GenCorp tech. I've never seen anything like them." Marcus finished wrapping his arm and leaned back against the medical console. "Ever heard of the Chimera Project?" Lyra's enhanced eyes widened. "That's a myth. A failed military experiment from the corporate wars." "Not failed," Marcus corrected, flexing his injured arm. "Just, discontinued. The military wanted soldiers who could adapt to any environment, any weapon. They got what they wanted, but the side effects were unexpected. We didn't just adapt to environments, we started adapting to everything. Including things like your touch." A proximity alarm blared through the ship, cutting off their conversation. They rushed to the bridge, where the tactical display showed 3 ships emerging from hyperspace. "GenCorp?" Lyra asked, already strapping into the co-pilot's seat. Marcus's cybernetic eye whirred as it analyzed the data. "Worse. Bounty hunters. The expensive kind." He pointed to the lead ship's signature. "That's the Blood Rose. Captain Valencia's ship. She's got a reputation for never losing her prey." "Then we better not be prey," Lyra said, her hands moving across the navigation controls. Her time on Europa Station had taught her more than just hiding, she'd learned every smuggler's route in the sector. Marcus grinned. "Now you're thinking. There's a debris field from an old battle about 2 clicks out. If we can make it there. The ship lurched as the first shots from their pursuers streaked past. The blood rose and its escort vessels were faster than the Shadowcaster, but their quarry had the advantage of desperation and intimate knowledge of the sector's dangers. Lyra guided them through a maze of twisted metal and frozen wreckage, remnants of battles long forgotten. Each piece of debris could hide a mine, an automated defense system, or worse. But she'd mapped these hazards during her years of running, marking safe passages that only she knew. "They're splitting up," Marcus announced, his attention divided between weapons and shields. "Trying to box us in. Valencia's smart, she knows we're heading for the Tartarus Rift." The Tartarus Rift was a gravitational anomaly, a tear in space that had swallowed countless ships. But Lyra had discovered something about it during her time studying old station logs, something that might save their lives. "Trust me?" she asked, her hands hovering over the controls. Marcus looked at her, his human eye meeting her enhanced ones. "Wouldn't be here if I didn't." Lyra punched in a series of coordinates, and the Shadowcaster dove toward the rift. Behind them, Valencia's ships opened fire again, their shots becoming more desperate as their target approached the gravitational disturbance. "The rift's pull is too strong," Marcus warned, fighting with the controls. "We're not going to be able to pull up." "We're not supposed to," Lyra replied, her voice steady. "There's a current in the gravitational field. If we hit it at exactly the right angle." The ship shuddered as the rift's forces grabbed hold. Warning lights flashed across every console, and the hull groaned under the strain. Through the view screen, space itself seemed to twist, forming impossible patterns that hurt to look at. Then, just as the pressure reached its peak, they broke through. The Shadowcaster emerged on the other side of the rift, in a pocket of calm space that shouldn't have existed. Behind them, they heard Valencia's frustrated transmission cut off as the rift's interference blocked all signals. That, Marcus said, letting out a breath he'd been holding, was either brilliant or insane. "Sometimes they're the same thing," Lyra replied, allowing herself a small smile. "I found this place while studying old mining charts. The rift's gravity creates a stable zone here, like the eye of a storm. We can wait until Valencia gives up and leaves." Marcus ran a system check, making sure their dramatic escape hadn't damaged anything critical. "We've got maybe 6 hours before we need to move. Valencia's persistent, but even she won't wait forever." He turned to Lyra, his expression serious. "We should use that time to talk about what GenCorp's really after." Lyra felt her momentary elation fade. "You said they were collecting their experiments. Why?" "Because they're afraid," Marcus said, pulling up an encrypted data file on his comm unit. "Something's changing in the enhanced population. Those of us who survived their experiments, we're evolving. Becoming something they didn't expect and can't control." The data file showed medical scans, genetic analyses, incident reports, all pointing to a pattern of accelerated adaptation among modified humans. Lyra saw her own file among them, noting how her toxic touch had grown stronger over time, more refined. "Your contact with me," Marcus continued, "it should have killed me, modified or not. But instead." He held up his hand, and Lyra watched in fascination as the microscopic scales shifted, taking on a silvery sheen similar to her own skin. "I adapted. Evolved. And that terrifies them. So what do we do?" Lyra asked, her mind racing with the implications. "We find others like us. There's a sanctuary on Titan's dark side, a place where the modified can live free. But first, we need to make a stop. I've got a contact in the Europan underground who might know more about what GenCorp's planning." Another alarm sounded, proximity sensors detecting movement at the edge of the rift. Valencia wasn't giving up as easily as they'd hoped. "Looks like our safe haven isn't so safe after all," Marcus said, already powering up the engines. "Ready for another adventure?" Lyra squared her shoulders, feeling more alive than she had in years. With you? Always. The Shadowcaster hummed to life, preparing for another desperate escape. But this time, Lyra wasn't running away. She was running towards something, answers, purpose, and maybe even a future where her touch wasn't just a curse, but a sign of humanity's next evolution. The neon-drenched undercity of New Shanghai sprawled beneath them like a circuit board gone mad, its streets pulsing with the frenetic energy of 10 million souls. The Shadowcaster touched down on a landing pad that looked abandoned but hummed with hidden security systems. Lyra could sense them with her enhanced vision, a web of laser triggers and motion detectors that would keep unwanted visitors away. "Your contact lives here," she asked, watching Marcus input a complex series of codes into the landing pad's control panel. "Not lives. Hides." Marcus's cybernetic eye whirred as it scanned their surroundings. "Jasmine runs the largest underground network of modified humans in the sector. If anyone knows what GenCorp's planning, it's her." The entrance to the underground complex revealed itself like a puzzle box opening, layers of security peeling back one at a time. They descended into a world that existed beneath the glittering surface of New Shanghai, where the modified and enhanced gathered in secret. The first thing that struck Lyra was the diversity of the modifications. She saw people with crystalline skin that refracted light, others with extra limbs that moved with impossible grace, and some whose forms seemed to shift and change as they walked. None of them shied away from her silver skin or feared her touch. "Welcome to Haven," a voice called out. A woman emerged from the shadows, her movements liquid smooth. Jasmine's modifications were subtle but striking, her eyes were completely black, and patterns of luminescent circuits traced their way across her dark skin like living tattoos. "Long time, Jazz," Marcus said, embracing her without hesitation. "We need your help." Jasmine's black eyes fixed on Lyra. "The toxic touch. I've heard stories about you. Didn't expect you to be traveling with a chimera." "Things change," Lyra said simply. Jasmine led them deeper into the complex, through rooms filled with advanced medical equipment and laboratories that rivaled GenCorp's own facilities. "We've been monitoring their movements," she explained. "They're not just collecting their old experiments, they're gathering data on how we've changed. Evolved." She brought up a holographic display showing a complex genetic structure. "This is a baseline enhanced human from 5 years ago." The display shifted. "And this is now. Our modifications aren't static, they're growing, adapting, becoming more than what GenCorp intended." "That's what they're afraid of," Marcus said. "We're becoming something they can't control." "It's more than that," Jasmine countered. "They're afraid we're becoming something they can't compete with. Evolution is outpacing their ability to engineer new modifications. And now they've discovered something else, we're starting to pass these changes on to our children." The revelation hit Lyra like a physical blow. Natural transmission of artificial modifications. "Impossible," Marcus breathed, but his human eye was wide with understanding. Unless the modifications are becoming part of our basic genetic structure," Jasmine finished. "We're not just changed humans anymore. We're the next step in human evolution." An alarm blared through the complex, cutting their discussion short. Jasmine's hands flew over the control panels, bringing up security feeds. "We've got company. GenCorp strike team, and they're not alone." The camera showed Captain Valencia leading the assault team. "They followed us," Lyra realized with horror. "Through the rift somehow." "No," Marcus said, his voice hard. "They were waiting. Someone told them we were coming." Jasmine was already moving, hitting emergency protocols that would evacuate the complex. "We've got hundreds of modified humans here, including children. We need time to get them out." Lyra looked at Marcus, saw the same determination in his face that she felt. "Then we'll give you time." They moved through the complex, helping coordinate the evacuation while preparing for battle. The modified residents grabbed what they could: research data, medical supplies, personal belongings. Emergency protocols kicked in, erasing computers and destroying anything that couldn't be moved. The main entrance is sealed, Jasmine reported from her command center. They're cutting through, but it'll take them at least 10 minutes. The tunnel network can get everyone out through the old subway systems. Marcus checked his weapons while Lyra prepared herself mentally for what was to come. Her touch had always been a curse, but today it would be a weapon wielded in defense of others like her. Jazz, Marcus said suddenly. The children, are any of them like Lyra? Toxic touch. Jasmine nodded. 3 of them. Their parents were different kinds of modified, but the children were born with abilities similar to hers. That's how we know the modifications are evolving, becoming hereditary. The implications were staggering, but there was no time to process them. The first explosion rocked the complex as GenCorp's forces began their assault. Get them out, Lyra said. All of them. We'll hold the line. The battle that followed was unlike anything Lyra had experienced before. She and Marcus fought alongside other modified humans, each using their unique abilities in concert. Her toxic touch became part of a larger strategy, herding enemies into positions where other defenders could take them down. Through it all, she watched Marcus fight, his chimera adaptations allowing him to take on multiple opponents at once. His scales now seemed to pulse with a silver light similar to her skin, as if their brief contact had permanently changed him. As the last of the residents evacuated through the tunnels, Jasmine joined them in the final defense. Her circuitry patterns flared with power as she interfaced directly with the complex's systems, turning the very building against the invaders. They're through, someone shouted as the main doors finally gave way. Valencia strode in, leading a team of GenCorp's elite soldiers. Her eyes locked onto Lyra with predatory focus. Did you really think you could hide forever? But something was wrong. Valencia's movements were too precise, her eyes too bright. Lyra's enhanced vision caught it first, the telltale signs of recent modification. She's one of us, Lyra realized with shock. They modified her too. Upgraded, Valencia corrected with a cruel smile. GenCorp learned from its mistakes. Made better versions. And now it's time to clean up the outdated models. The battle that followed would change everything, not just for Lyra and Marcus, but for the future of human evolution itself. The battle in Haven's main chamber was chaos incarnate. Valencia moved with inhuman speed, her upgrades evident in every deadly motion. But she wasn't alone, each GenCorp soldier displayed signs of enhancement, their movements too precise, too coordinated to be natural. They're using our own modifications against us, Marcus shouted, his scales shifting to deflect a barrage of energy weapons. But something's wrong with them, look at their eyes. Lyra saw it through her enhanced vision. The soldiers' pupils were dilated, their movements almost mechanical. Whatever GenCorp had done to them, it had cost them something essential. Something human. Jasmine's voice crackled through their comm units. The evacuation's complete, but I've found something in their tactical network. They're not just here for us, they're after the research data. All of it. Why? Lyra ducked under Valencia's strike, her silver skin gleaming as she rolled away. They already know how to modify humans. But they don't know how we evolved, Marcus replied, understanding dawning in his mismatched eyes. Their new modifications are artificial, forced. Ours are becoming natural, sustainable. Valencia laughed, the sound unnaturally sharp. Natural? There's nothing natural about any of you. Your mistakes, failed experiments that should have been terminated. We are the future, perfectly controlled, perfectly obedient. Perfectly enslaved, Lyra countered, and for the first time, she felt no guilt about her deadly touch. She lunged at Valencia, who barely managed to dodge. The fight had driven them deeper into Haven's laboratories. Equipment sparked and shattered around them as Valencia's forces pressed their attack. But the defenders had one advantage: they fought as individuals, each using their unique abilities creatively, while GenCorp's soldiers moved like a hive mind, predictable in their perfection. Marcus. Jasmine's voice cut through the chaos. I need you in the main lab. Now. Lyra, keep them busy. Lyra didn't hesitate. She pressed forward, forcing Valencia and her soldiers to focus on her. Her toxic touch had become more refined over the years, she could now control its intensity, making it debilitating rather than lethal when she chose. In the lab, Marcus found Jasmine interfaced with Haven's mainframe, her circuit patterns pulsing rapidly. Look at this, she said, projecting a complex genetic diagram. I've been analyzing the data from Valencia's team. The new modifications they're using, they're based on yours. The Chimera project? Marcus stared at the display. But that was military, not GenCorp. They acquired the research after the corporate wars. But they could never replicate the adaptive properties correctly. That's why they're hunting the original subjects, they need fresh genetic samples to perfect their formula. A massive explosion rocked the complex. Through the lab's broken windows, they could see Lyra holding her own against Valencia, both women moving in a deadly dance. But something was changing, Valencia's movements were becoming erratic, less controlled. Her modifications are breaking down, Jasmine realized, checking new data streams. The artificial evolution process isn't stable. They all have an expiration date. Marcus's cybernetic I word as he processed the implications. That's why they're desperate. Their perfect soldiers are temporary. But our evolution, the natural changes we're going through, are permanent, Jasmine finished. And accelerating. Every time we use our abilities, every time we adapt to new challenges, we evolve further. Lyra's touch isn't just toxic anymore, it's becoming something else. Something that can rewrite genetic code on contact. As if to prove her point, they watched as Lyra finally made contact with Valencia. The bounty hunter screamed, but not in death throes. Her body convulsed as Lyra's touch triggered something in her modified genetics. She's not killing them, Marcus breathed. She's freeing them. Valencia collapsed, her enhanced soldiers falling with her as some kind of networked connection broke. When she looked up again, her eyes were clear, confused but human. What did you do to me? Valencia gasped. Lyra stood over her, silver skin glowing with newfound purpose. I showed your modifications what real evolution looks like. Your artificial changes couldn't compete with natural adaptation. They broke down and rebuilt themselves based on my genetic template. Marcus and Jasmine rushed to join her, bringing the genetic data they'd discovered. GenCorp didn't just make weapons, Jasmine explained, showing Valencia the evidence on her holographic display. They accidentally created catalysts for human evolution. But they couldn't control it, couldn't predict where the changes would lead. So they tried to start over, make a more controllable version. But you can't control evolution, Marcus added. It's not about perfection, it's about adaptation, change, growth. That's what makes it beautiful. And terrible. Valencia looked at her hands, watching as her skin began to develop patterns similar to Lyra's silver sheen. I remember now. The upgrades, they didn't just modify our bodies. They changed our minds, made us compliant. But your touch, it broke their programming. More explosions echoed through the complex, GenCorp's second wave of forces approaching. But now they had something they didn't have before, understanding. And a way to fight back that didn't require killing. Lyra looked at her hands, seeing them not as instruments of death but as tools of transformation. We need to get this information out. All of it. Show the world what GenCorp's really doing, and what we're really becoming. The Titan Sanctuary, Marcus suggested. If we can get there, broadcast the truth. They'll try to stop us, Jasmine warned. Everything they've built depends on keeping this secret. Lyra helped Valencia to her feet, watching as the former bounty hunter's body continued to adapt and change. Then let them try. We're not running anymore. It's time to show them what real evolution looks like. As they prepared for their final confrontation with GenCorp, Lyra felt a strange peace settle over her. Her curse had become a gift, not just for her, but for all of humanity. The next stage of evolution was beginning, and she would help guide it, one touch at a time. The Titan sanctuary rose from the methane ice like a cathedral of steel and light, its crystalline domes refracting the distant sun in prismatic patterns. The Shadowcaster approached through Saturn's rings, using the ice and debris for cover. Behind them, a fleet of GenCorp warships followed in attack formation. Inside the ship's cockpit, Lyra watched Marcus pilot while their unlikely crew prepared for what was coming. Valencia, her body still adapting to its new evolutionary path, monitored the tactical display. Jasmine sat interfaced with the ship's systems, her circuit patterns pulsing as she processed vast amounts of data. Their entire board of directors is on that command ship, Valencia reported, her silver-tinged skin now almost matching Lyra's. They wouldn't commit so heavily unless they were desperate. They are desperate, Jasmine confirmed, her black eyes reflecting streams of code. I've decoded more of their files. The instability in their artificial modifications isn't just physical, it's spreading. Their entire enhanced army is breaking down, and they can't stop it. Marcus's cybernetic eye whirred as he navigated through a particularly dense cluster of ice. How long? Days. Maybe hours. Once the breakdown starts, it cascades through their neural networks. That's why they need us, specifically, they need Lyra. Her ability to rewrite genetic code is the key to stabilizing their modifications. Lyra stood, moving to the viewport to watch Titan's surface approach. They don't understand. Stability isn't about control, it's about embracing change. She turned to face her companions, her silver skin luminescent in the dim cockpit. Are the Sanctuary's broadcasting systems ready? Ready, Jasmine confirmed. One burst transmission and every network in the system will have the truth about GenCorp's experiments. But she hesitated, we'll only get one shot before they jam us. The ship shuddered as the first shots from GenCorp's fleet found their range. Marcus engaged evasive maneuvers, diving toward Titan's thick atmosphere. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast. They broke through the cloud layer into driving winds of methane snow. The Sanctuary's defense systems recognized them, opening a path through the storm. Behind them, GenCorp's ships followed, their weapons heating the atmosphere into brilliant plumes of flame. The Shadowcaster landed hard on the Sanctuary's main platform. Already, other modified humans were emerging from the structure, refugees from Haven, survivors of other GenCorp experiments, all of them evolved beyond their original designs. They're deploying ground forces, Valencia warned as they rushed from the ship. And, something else. Something big. The something else broke through the clouds like a nightmare-given form. A massive humanoid figure, easily 4 stories tall, its body a patchwork of mechanical and biological components. In its chest, visible through layers of transparent armor, stood a man Lyra recognized from countless GenCorp propaganda videos, Director Richards himself. Did you think we wouldn't adapt as well? His voice boomed across the landing platform. You're not the only ones who can evolve. The hybrid monstrosity landed before them, its impact cracking the platform's surface. Around it, squads of GenCorp's enhanced soldiers took up positions, their movements increasingly erratic as their modifications continued to break down. This is what you call evolution? Lyra called out, stepping forward. More control. More machines. You're not evolving, you're running away from what we're becoming. What you're becoming is a threat to ordered civilization, Richards replied. Unpredictable. Uncontrollable. We gave you power, and you rejected our guidance. You gave us chains, Marcus said, moving to stand beside Lyra. We broke them. The battle that followed would be remembered in legends. The Sanctuary's defenders fought with their evolved abilities, each unique, each powerful in its own way. Valencia and her former soldiers, their artificial programming replaced by true adaptation, turned on their former masters. But it was Lyra who reached the heart of the conflict. As Richards's hybrid form tore through their defenses, she saw what the others didn't, the fear in his eyes. Fear not of them, but of the future they represented. "Let me show you," she said, dodging the massive arms that tried to crush her. "Let me show you what real evolution feels like." She leaped, her silver skin blazing like a star, and pressed her hand against the transparent armor protecting Richards. At first, nothing happened. Then, like ice cracking in sunlight, changes began to spread through the hybrid form. "No!" Richards screamed. "I won't let you corrupt my perfect design." But it was too late. The mechanical components of his creation began to shift, becoming more organic, more alive. The biological parts evolved rapidly, adapting to their new reality. Richards himself changed, his carefully engineered modifications giving way to true evolution. The massive form crashed to its knees, then began to shrink, the mechanical parts falling away like shed skin. Around them, the remaining GenCorp soldiers underwent similar transformations as the change spread through their neural network. "Jasmine, now!" Marcus shouted. The Sanctuary's transmission arrays lit up like beacons, broadcasting the truth across the system. Not just about GenCorp's experiments, but about what humanity was becoming. About the choice between controlling evolution and embracing it. Hours later, as the methane storms raged outside, Lyra stood in the Sanctuary's observation dome. Richards and his officers were in custody, their bodies still adapting to their new evolutionary path. The modified humans, both old and new, were working together to understand their changing abilities. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, joining her at the window. His scales shimmered with hints of silver, a permanent reminder of how they'd changed each other. "We keep evolving," Lyra replied, watching her reflection in the glass. "Not as weapons or experiments, but as whatever we're meant to become." "Together?" he asked, taking her hand without fear. Lyra smiled, feeling the warm pulse of life and change flowing between them. Together. After all, evolution works better with a partner. Above them, through gaps in Titan's clouds, Earth shone like a distant jewel. Humanity's cradle, where their species had first learned to adapt and change. Now, in the far reaches of the solar system, that change was taking a new form. Not an ending, but a beginning. For Lyra, whose touch had once meant only death, it was more than evolution, it was redemption. Her curse had become a gift, not just to herself, but to all of humanity. A gift of change, of growth, of becoming something more than they had been designed to be. And that was the greatest evolution of all.